The letter lay on Administrator Vex's desk with all the quiet menace of a primed explosive, though, given what it claimed, an actual bomb might have been the more rational choice. Vex was Drexery, which meant three things by definition: a mind built for ruthless pattern detection, a metabolism that treated caffeine analogs like plain hydration, and absolutely no patience for foolishness. 23 years of screening academy applications had honed his instinct for exaggeration into something approaching a scientific instrument, and this document was setting off every single sensor. He read it once, then again, then a third time, because surely he had misread a key line somewhere. Responded to the incident with remarkable composure. When Instructor Krell's blade malfunctioned during the training demonstration, Candidate Davies intercepted the weapon's trajectory with her bare hand, preventing injury to the 3 cadets in the strike path. Medical examination revealed superficial lacerations. She declined tissue regeneration, stating she wanted to see how it healed naturally. I cannot emphasize enough. Vex broke off, exhaling sharply, and lowered the letter. He flicked his fingers over the desk console and opened the attached medical scans. Terran physiology was still a relatively recent addition to the database. Humans had only joined the wider galactic community 4 decades ago, and they still mostly clung to their own region of the spiral arm, doing whatever it was humans did when left unsupervised. The scan resolved into a hand, 5 digits as expected. Bone structure matched the Terran profile. Minor cuts along the palm and fingers, tissue damage consistent with the report. What the scans did not provide was any reasonable explanation for how those fingers were still attached. Khalees, Vex called. His assistant, a fiend, occupied the desk just outside his office. There was a brief pause, then she appeared in the doorway, her chromatic scales sliding toward a puzzled yellow-green. Pull the threat assessment on tool user class implements, Vex said. Category, bladed weapons. Manufacturer, Varel. Khalees tapped at her wrist console. The Varel ceremonial combat blades? She asked. The same series Frontier Outpost Kelser. 9 uses for security drills? Vex inclined his head. Those are rated to cut through compressed Durac steel plating, she said slowly. Her scales shivered to orange. What? Vex passed her the letter. He watched her read. Watched her scales cycle through confusion, disbelief, and finally settle into a queasy purple that never meant anything good. This is a joke application, Khalees said flatly. The medical scans are authenticated, Vex replied. I checked. Then the scans are falsified. Authenticated by 3 separate systems, Vex said. Biometric signatures confirmed. The outpost commander's credentials are legitimate. Decorated officer. 15 years frontier service. 0 disciplinary actions. Khalees read the letter again, this time more slowly, as if the words might rearrange into something saner if given the chance. Humans don't have regenerative tissue, she said at last. They lack subdermal armor plating. Their bone density is unremarkable for their mass category. There is no biological framework that would allow. I'm aware, Vex cut in. So this is either an elaborate fraud or... Khalees let the sentence fray away, her scales cycling through several shades that didn't have names in standard. She looked up. What are humans exactly? That, Vex thought, was the question, wasn't it? He pulled up the species file. Terran, he read. Colloquial designation. Humans. Bipedal, bilateral symmetry. Standard carbon-based biochemistry. Homeworld Earth. Class M planet noted for an unusually aggressive evolutionary environment. Predator-prey status, omnivore. Persistence predator classification. He scrolled. Threat assessment. Inconclusive. That entry had irritated him from the day it was filed. Every recognized species in the galactic community had a numerical threat index. The Val were rated 7.3. The Qatari came in at 2.1. The Fiend averaged a flat 4.0. Humans were tagged as inconclusive. The footnote elaborated insufficient data. Behavioral analysis suggests wide variation in individual capacity. Recommend case-by-case evaluation. Bureaucratic 4, we have absolutely no idea what these things are. The stories didn't help. Accounts of humans were either entirely mundane or frankly absurd. In some, they were alarmingly fragile, bones snapping under relatively minor impacts, skin tearing with ease, immune systems susceptible to simple infections that other species shrugged off. In others, they were borderline mythic, walking nightmares from some evolutionary fever dream. Vex had heard the rumors. Humans who had survived direct vacuum exposure. Humans who had continued to fight with injuries that should have induced shock and coma. Humans who had managed to negotiate a peace treaty with the Viral, a culture that respected exactly one metric: demonstrated superiority in combat. Nobody could agree on what humans truly were, because every human seemed to be something different. "Pull her full application file," Vex said. Khalees hesitated in the doorway. "You're not seriously considering?" "The Calder has trained warriors from 417 species over the last 6 centuries, Vex said. His voice had gone calm, which Khalees correctly interpreted as a sign he had made up his mind. "We have redesigned our programs for candidates who breathe methane, candidates whose visual spectrum does not overlap with our own, and one memorable silicon-based entity who experienced time in reverse." He tapped the letter with one clawed fingertip. "If this human is even half of what this commander claims, she presents a genuine pedagogical challenge," he continued. "And if she is a fraud, we will expose that within the first week and expel her accordingly." "And if she's dangerous?" Khalees asked quietly. Vex considered this. The Calrith Academy wasn't, strictly speaking, a military institution. Not exactly. It was a crucible, a place where the most capable combatants in the galaxy came to measure themselves against the best the other species could produce. Political heirs, elite mercenary hopefuls, security operatives, personal guards for individuals whose lives were worth more than small moons. The training was brutal because the galaxy was brutal, and sending anyone into that galaxy without proper preparation wasn't mercy. It was cruelty. The Academy's mortality rate hovered at 0.3%. Injuries were routine. Washouts were anticipated. And every cadet who stepped through those doors knew exactly what they were volunteering for. "If she's dangerous," Vex said slowly, turning the thought over with care, "then she'll fit right in." Khalees's scales dulled to a flat gray. "I'll process the acceptance letter. I'll add her to the next orientation cohort." She paused at the doorway. And Khalees?" Vex added. "Yes," she said, glancing back. "Flag her file for observation. I want weekly reports from every instructor she's assigned." "You think something's going to happen?" Khalees asked. Vex looked once more at the medical scans, at the clinical notations, at the casually written phrase, "declined tissue regeneration," as though that were a completely ordinary choice. "I think," Vex said carefully, "that we are about to learn something new about humans. Whether that turns out to be beneficial or catastrophically disastrous remains to be seen." After Khalees left, Vex opened the acceptance queue and dragged candidate Davies' file to the very top of the list. He tagged her as Observation Priority 1, then opened the species designation field and added a private note: "Monitor for behavioral anomalies." He hesitated only a moment before appending a second line: "If the scanner flags do not engage, trust the scanner." He authorized the application, transmitted the acceptance notification, and leaned back in his chair. In 6 weeks, candidate Davies would arrive at the Calrith Academy. In 6 weeks, they would all discover whether humans were delicate evolutionary accidents who had simply stumbled into survival by chance, or something entirely different. Vex had a feeling it was going to be a very interesting term. Somewhere at the back of his mind, a small, unwelcome voice whispered that perhaps he should have rejected the application, that maybe, just maybe, there were some pedagogical problems the Academy was not designed to manage. He ignored the voice. He'd been doing this too long to start doubting his own judgment now. Still, he made a quiet mental note to update his personal insurance policy, just in case. The scanner would not stop shrieking. Davies had owned the device for precisely 8 hours. Standard Academy issue, handed to her at the shuttle dock along with a room assignment, a meal voucher, and a data slate packed with 73 pages of regulations. She had absolutely no intention of reading those. The scanner, according to the cheerful briefing, was designed to provide situational awareness, threat assessment, environmental hazards, tactical advisories. All very practical. In practice, what it was doing was having a continuous meltdown. Alert, Viral Combat, Specialist detected. Threat level, extreme. Recommended action, maintain minimum distance of 15 meters. That warning was for the purple-skinned individual standing in the registration queue ahead of her, currently locked in deadly, earnest contemplation of the beverage menu at the dispensary, as if choosing the wrong drink might destabilize a star. Alert, species, Cadet. Venomous. Threat level, high. Recommended action, avoid physical contact. The Cadet in question was barely a meter tall and was struggling to reach the registration counter. Davies watched as a helpful fiend leaned down to assist, guiding tiny hands through the required forms. Alert, fiend, chromatic, signaling detected. Psychological warfare potential identified. Threat level, moderate. The fiend's scales rippled gently through colors as they spoke, apparently enough to make the scanner nervous. Does yours do that too? Someone asked. Davies glanced sideways. The speaker was a Quoven, all four arms folded across their torso in what might have been amusement or might simply have been the default resting position for their species. Hard to say. Do what? Davies asked. Shriek non-stop, the Quoven said. Mine's been insisting you're dangerous for the last 5 minutes. Davies looked down at her own scanner. The display had shifted. Alert, species, Terran, human. Threat evaluation, insufficient data. Recommended action, observe from a safe distance. Davies said. That's honestly fair, I guess. The Quoven's arms shifted into a different configuration that might have been the equivalent of a raised eyebrow. You don't know what your own threat level is? I mean, I'm not planning on biting anyone, Davies said. That's not really a threat assessment. That's just basic social behavior. Where I'm from, that already counts as impressively polite. The sound the Quoven made in response might have been a laugh, a rapid, chittering noise that prompted Davies' scanner to add another note. Alert, possible territorial display. Reassessing social dynamics. I'm COR, the Quoven said. Engineering track, with a minor in tactical demolitions. Davies, she replied. Combat track. Specialization undecided. Terranite, COR said. I heard they accepted one this cycle. Everyone's betting on how long you last. Davies blinked. There's a betting pool? There's always a betting pool, COR said. What's the spread again? Right. 3 days to full semester. Most of the money's on 2 weeks. Long enough to survive basic orientation. Short enough that you flunk out before live weapons training. COR hesitated, then added, I put 50 credits on you making it to the end of the semester, though. Humans have that whole too stupid to quit thing going for you. Davies briefly considered being offended, then decided that, on balance, it was not entirely inaccurate. Appreciate the vote of confidence, she said. The line shuffled forward. The Viral at the front had finally committed to a beverage, some kind of protein slurry that smelled like gym socks that had achieved self-awareness and chosen violence. The scanner dutifully updated. Alert, potential chemical irritant detected. Recommended action, avoid inhalation at close range. Can I ask you something? COR said. Their vocal frills fluttered in a way that, even across species, read as genuine curiosity. Why would a human even apply here? COR asked. Your species barely registers on most combat effectiveness scales. No offense. None taken, Davies said. We're new. There isn't much data on us yet. Right, COR said. But the data that does exist is confusing. They tilted their head. There was this incident at a trade station last year. Human freighter captain gets into an argument with a Val mercenary. The Viral calls for single combat. Standard dominance ritual. How'd that go? Davies asked. The human won, COR said. Snapped the Viral's primary arm, then bought him a drink. They're apparently business partners now. Cor's arms went through a complex sequence of motions that might have been their species' version of a shrug. But then COR continued. There are also reports of humans dying from basic bacterial infections. Broken bones that don't mend right. Organs that just stop working for no discernible reason. So which is it? Are you durable or fragile? Davies considered the question. She thought of the scar on her palm from the incident that had earned her this academy slot, the one that still itched when the weather shifted. She thought of her grandmother, who had survived 3 separate cancers and a car crash, only to slip in the shower at 73 and break her hip. She thought of her cousin who had walked away from a shuttle crash and her neighbor who had died because of a peanut. Yes, she said at last. Yes. COR echoed. What does that mean? Yes, we're durable. Yes, we're fragile, Davies said. Depends on the day, honestly. COR stared at her with all 4 eyes. That is the worst threat assessment I have ever heard. Tell me about it, Davies said. The scanner's been having an existential crisis since I turned it on. They reached the registration desk. The attendant, a Siversh with the exhausted look of someone who had endured the same conversation 300 times today, barely glanced up. Name and track designation, they droned. Davies. Combat track. Now the attendant looked up properly, eyes flicking from her face to the species indicator on the form. You're the Terran, they said. Last time I checked, Davies replied. There's a note on your file, the Siversh said. You're flagged for instructor observation. Is that normal for promising candidates? Davies asked. Yes, the attendant said. For candidates whose species classification is listed as figure it out as we go, less so. They process the registration with smooth, automatic efficiency. Quarters are in the East Wing, they recited. Training facilities are in the Central Campus sector. Mess hall operates on a rotating schedule to accommodate species-specific dietary needs and time perception differences. Your schedule has been uploaded to your data slate. Questions? Just one, Davies said. Does the scanner ever stop? The scanner chose that moment to escalate. Alert mass, threat convergence detected. Multiple high-risk species in close proximity. Threat level, extreme. Recommended action, evacuate immediately. The attendant's expression shifted subtly, something that might have been sympathy. No, they said, but you get used to it. Great, Davies muttered. COR caught up with her outside the registration building. The campus stretched out before them, a carefully engineered collage of structures designed to meet wildly different biological needs. Gravity gradients shifted from building to building. Atmospheric composition changed by wing. Somewhere in the distance, something roared, either an intense training scenario or someone's alarm clock with very aggressive settings. The scanner updated again, of course. Alert overall, threat level, critical. Recommended action, reconsider life choices. First combat assessment is tomorrow morning, COR said. Instructor demonstration, meant to set the baseline. Baseline for what? Davies asked. For understanding exactly how far behind you are, COR said mildly, and how hard you'll have to work to survive this place. Their frills fluttered again. Fair warning, COR added. The instructors don't go easy on anyone. Their logic is simple. If you can't handle watching a demonstration, you definitely can't handle the real thing. Davies looked down at the scanner, at the endless scroll of warnings. Then she looked up at the campus, a place filled with species evolution had turned into precise, specialized killers, each one tuned for a particular environment, a particular prey, a particular way of surviving. Earth didn't do specialization. Earth had polar bears and box jellyfish and mosquitoes and honey badgers and humans. Earth just hurled everything at existence and kept whatever didn't immediately die. Should be interesting, Davies said. COR made that chittering sound again. You know what? I'm starting to think I should have bet more on you. The scanner, apparently offended, flashed one last notice. Alert current behavior pattern inconsistent with standard survival instincts. Recommended action. Psychological evaluation advised. Davies switched the device off. Tomorrow would handle itself. The training hall smelled like ozone and fear, which Davies was beginning to suspect was the Academy's preferred aesthetic. 200 cadets sat in tiered seating around a central arena. The chamber had been engineered to support multiple gravity fields, atmospheric mixes, and temperature zones at once. An architectural marvel that cost more than most planetary defense arrays. Right now, It was locked to baseline. 1.0 gravity, nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, and a comfortably neutral temperature. Comfortable, Davies decided, was a relative term. She sat wedged between COR and a Theshan whose name translated to something like Cliff Dancer who hunts at dawn, but who had told everyone to just call him Tresh. The scanner, reluctantly switched back on after COR pointed out that missing an actual emergency would be humiliating, was currently painting the entire instructor cadre in so many shades of red that it probably violated several visual spectrum regulations. "That's Blade Master Krev," Tresh whispered, indicating a Val who stood a solid 2.3 meters tall and looked as if evolution had started with the concept of sword and then reverse-engineered a body to wield it. Undefeated in 47 honor duels. Losses left, I to a Kathari assassin and killed her anyway. "How inspiring," Davies muttered. "That's not the scary one," Tresh said. He nodded toward a smaller figure on the far side of the arena, barely 1.5 meters tall, encased in reflective black, plating with far too many joints for Davies' comfort. "That's Instructor Vest," he said. "Ambush specialist. She held a supply depot against an entire mercenary company for 6 days. Alone." Davies counted 12 instructors in total, each representing a different combat discipline. Ranged weapons, close quarters engagement, zero-gravity combat, psychological operations. The full catalog of ways to ruin someone's day. Blade Master Krev stepped forward. The background chatter died at once. "You are here," Krev said, his voice hitting frequencies that made Davies' teeth ache, "because you believe you have potential. Because someone, somewhere, decided you were worth training." He let the silence stretch. They were probably wrong. Uneasy laughter rippled through the tiers of cadets. Davies noticed none of the instructors were laughing. "Combat is not theoretical," Krev continued. "It is not academic. You cannot negotiate with physics, and the universe does not grade on a curve." He drew his weapon, a traditional Val blade, curved and vicious, its light drinking edge turning the metal into a sliver of darkness. "We will demonstrate basic engagement protocols," he said. "You will observe. You will learn. You will not embarrass yourselves by fainting." The last remark was aimed pointedly at a cluster of plenary cadets who went very still. Instructor Vest moved to the opposite side of the arena. The overhead lights dimmed. Environmental controls shifted. Gravity dropped to 0.7. Temperature climbed by 5 degrees. Humidity spiked. They moved. Davies had seen professional fighters before, recorded duels, archived combat footage, even a few sparring sessions with a security team back on the outpost. This was different. This was art and murder, holding a conversation in a language made entirely of violence. Krev's blade traced arcs too fast for her eyes to track. Vest countered with angles and strikes that shouldn't have been anatomically possible given her joint structure. Sparks flared across the arena floor where metal met metal. The air itself seemed to hum. "Beautiful," Tresh breathed. Core's arms had locked into a tight, protective configuration. "That's not a demonstration," they said quietly. "That's a threat." The engagement lasted 90 seconds. It ended with Krev's blade resting at Vest's throat and Vest's secondary weapon pressed against Krev's primary artery. Perfect mutual destruction, executed with surgical precision. They broke apart. The cadets erupted, some in excited chatter, others in sounds that were definitely fear, species-dependent. Krev lifted a hand. Silence dropped like a curtain. "Questions?" he asked. Davies' hand was in the air before her brain caught up with what her body had just done. Every gaze in the arena snapped toward her. The scanner, recognizing a catastrophic choice in progress, flashed a single directive across her vision. "Abort current action." "Yes," Krev said, his eye fixing on her. "The Terran. When you transitioned from guard position 3 to the overhead strike," Davies said, "your weight shifted to your rear foot. Was that intentional misdirection, or were you compensating for the reduced gravity?" Silence again, this time with weight. Krev's remaining eye narrowed. "You saw that. Hard to miss, once you know to look," she said. "Most cadets see the blade," Krev said. "They do not see the feet." Something that might have been approval flickered across his face. "Stand," he said. Davies stood. The scanner finally lost what little composure it had left. "Danger. Direct engagement imminent. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage." "Come here," Krev said. She walked down toward the arena floor. Every survival instinct honed by millions of years of human evolution was screaming at her to turn around and run. She ignored them. Her instincts had been wrong before, about the snake, about the electrical fire, about that entire month in survival training. Krev studied her closely. "You have combat experience," he said. "Some," she replied. "Frontier outpost security training. Basic hand-to-hand. Certified in non-lethal restraint protocols." "That is not combat," Krev said. "That is a strongly worded suggestion." He lifted his blade. "This is combat," Krev said. "Do you understand the difference?" "I'm starting to," Davies replied. Krev made a sound that might have been amusement. "I will perform the sequence again, slowly. You will watch the footwork, since you claim such keen attention to detail." He moved into position. Davies watched, cataloging everything. The stance, the balance over his feet, the subtle shifts of weight, the tiny corrections as he prepared to strike. "Now," Krev said, "I will perform it at combat speed. Watch carefully. Most students never." He struck. Not at her. Past her. A demonstration cut, calculated to miss by at least half a meter. Except the angle was wrong, or the distance was wrong, or Davies had taken one unconscious step forward when she should have remained where she was. The blade came around faster than thought, faster than reaction. There was no time to duck, nowhere to move. So Davies caught it. Her hand closed around the blade mid-swing. She felt the edge slice in her palm, bite along her fingers. Felt the momentum slam through her arm into her shoulder. Felt something in her wrist make a sound that should never have existed outside an anatomy sim. Time stuttered, then lurched back into motion. Krev stared at his weapon, at Davies' hand wrapped around 30 centimeters of honed murder, at the blood beginning to seep between her fingers. "What?" he said very quietly. "Did you just do?" Davies looked at her hand, at the blade, at the spreading crimson that was very obviously hers. "Caught it," she said. "That blade is rated to sever reinforced bone," Krev said. "Your fingers should be on the floor." "Yeah," Davies said. "That probably would have been bad." "You are bleeding," Krev said. "A great deal. You should be screaming." Davies considered that. The pain was there, sharp, insistent, already promising to be a serious issue later, but screaming felt excessive. "You were going to stop before it actually hit me, right?" she asked. Krev's expression flickered through several emotions that didn't have names in standard. "I was demonstrating combat speed," he said. "But this is orientation," Davies said. "You wouldn't actually hurt someone on the first day." "The blade does not distinguish between demonstration and intent," Krev replied. "Yeah," Davies said. "I probably should have thought of that before I grabbed it, honestly." The medical team arrived at a run. 3 Fiend with emergency packs and expressions that strongly suggested this scenario was not covered in the orientation guidelines. One medic scanned Davies' hand, frowned at the readout, and scanned again. "Bone integrity maintained," she said, baffled. "Tendon damage minimal. Lacerations consistent with impact trauma, but..." She looked up at Krev. "Sir, the blade should have." "I am aware of what the blade should have done," Krev said. They pried Davies' hand off the weapon, a process that hurt significantly more than catching the blade had. The medic began field treatment, layering coagulants and synthetic skin, muttering under her breath in a language Davies didn't recognize, but which sounded extremely clinical and mildly obscene. 200 cadets sat in complete silence. Core's arms had rearranged themselves into a configuration that likely meant I have no idea what I just witnessed, but I'm certain it violated at least one law of physics. Tresh had gone very pale, which for a Theshan meant his scales had shifted from green to a washed-out beige. Krev lifted his blade, examining the edge. A single drop of human blood slid down the metal and fell onto the arena floor. "Terran," he said slowly. "Sir," Davies asked. "In my 3 decades of instruction," Krev said, I have trained warriors from species with regenerative biology, species with exoskeletons, species whose distributed nervous systems do not experience pain as you do. He paused. You have none of these advantages. No, sir, Davies said. Your scanner, Krev went on. What did it say before you caught the blade? Davies pulled up the log, scrolling back to the last alert. Do not engage. Lethal threat detected, she read. And yet you engaged anyway. The scanner says that about everything, Davies said. If I listened to it, I'd never leave my quarters. Krev looked at her, then at the other instructors, then back to Davies, whose hand was now wrapped in enough medical material to treat a small battalion. Class dismissed, he said. Except you. You stay. The cadets surged toward the exits in a rush of whispers and sideways glances. COR shot Davies a look that very clearly translated to you are either the bravest person I've ever met or the dumbest. Possibly both. Tresh just shook his head. When the hall was finally empty, Krev sheathed his blade. What, he asked in a conversational tone, is wrong with your species? Davies flexed her bandaged hand. Pain lanced up her arm. How much time do you have? She asked. The conference room was designed for comfort, which meant it managed to be equally uncomfortable for everyone present. Instructor Vest sat in a chair built for Sicran physiology, which left her at an awkward angle to the table. Blade Master Krev remained standing because sitting was for species without a sense of drama. Medical Officer Vni occupied 2 chairs. Gvine Anatomy required the extra surface area. And Administrator Vex, who had arrived on an express shuttle from the administrative campus after receiving 14 urgent messages in the span of 20 minutes, looked like he regretted every career decision that had led him to this exact moment. Davies sat across from them, her hand freshly rebandaged after a more thorough medical exam. The scanner rested on the table between them, powered down, as if it had finally conceded defeat. Walk me through it again, Vex said, rubbing the ridge above his eyes where Drexery developed stress headaches. Slowly, Krev gestured toward the holographic replay hovering above the table. Standard demonstration, he said. Combat speed engagement sequence. I explicitly angled the strike to miss by 0.53 meters. Except the Terran moved forward 0.06 meters during execution, the knee supplied. Vex looked at Davies. Why? Better angle to see the footwork, she said. You stepped into a lethal strike zone to improve your viewing angle, Vex said. When you say it like that, it sounds bad, Davies replied. Medical Officer, the knee made a sound like wind through shattered glass. Divine laughter. The preliminary scans are fascinating, the knee said. Human bone has tensile strength roughly equivalent to reinforced concrete. The hand structure contains 27 individual bones connected by an absurdly complex network of tendons and ligaments. It is not designed to stop blades. It is designed for tool manipulation. And yet, Vest said quietly, it stopped the blade. The blade was moving at approximately 40 meters per second. The knee continued. Impact force should have resulted in complete severance of all digits. She brought up the medical imagery. Instead, she said, we have bruised bone, strained tendons, lacerations. Painful, certainly. Debilitating, yes. But no amputation. Vex stared at the scans. Explain how this is possible. I can't, Denise said. Human physiology does not include subdermal armor, no redundant skeletal reinforcement. Their pain receptors are actually quite sensitive. She should have dropped the blade immediately upon contact. But I didn't, Davies pointed out helpfully. Yes, Denise said dryly. We noticed. She zoomed in on the tendon imaging. The grip strength is remarkable. You maintained your hold despite nerve trauma that should have triggered involuntary muscle release. Letting go seemed like it would make things worse, Davies said. Krev folded his arms. Define worse. Well, if I'd let go after grabbing it, Davies said, the blade would have kept going. Into my torso. That felt counterproductive. So your solution, Krev said, was to hold on to the weapon actively cutting into your hand. Lesser of two bad options, Davies replied. Vest leaned forward, her reflective plating catching the light. You studied frontier security protocols. What's the first rule of blade defense? Don't grab the blade, Davies said. And yet, Vest prompted. Davies flexed her injured hand carefully. In my defense, I had about 0.3 seconds to decide. Grabbing it was instinct. That, Vex said slowly, is what concerns me. Your instinct when faced with imminent harm was to engage the threat directly instead of evading it. Evading would have required more space than I had, Davies said. You created the lack of space by moving forward, Vex said. To see the footwork better, yes, Davies replied. We've covered this. Vex pulled up Davies' application file, scrolling through the initial assessments until he found a section he wanted. Your psychological evaluation flagged you as displaying normal Terran risk assessment patterns, he said. At the time, I assumed that meant you were adequately cautious. I am cautious, Davies said. You caught a blade moving at lethal velocity with your unprotected hand, Vex said. Cautiously, she added. Krev made a low sound that might have been a growl or barely suppressed amusement. She has a point, he said. The technique was not entirely incompetent. Hand position minimized edge contact. Grip prevented the blade from sliding and increasing damage. Under different circumstances, against a less refined weapon, it might have been almost tactical. Might have been, Vest echoed. Almost tactical. Glowing praise. Me closed the medical scans. I need to update the Terran species file. Current threat assessment is listed as inconclusive. After today's incident, I'm recommending we revise that to unpredictable with suicidal tendencies. I'm not suicidal, Davies protested. You grabbed a moving blade, Denise said. Because standing still meant getting hit by a moving blade, Davies said. Different problem, same blade. Vex set his tablet down and studied Davies with the look of someone trying to solve an equation whose variables kept changing. Help me understand something, he said. The scanner gave you explicit warnings. Do not engage. Lethal threat. You ignored them. The scanner warned me about SOAR, Davies said, and Tresh and the beverage dispenser, which I'm pretty sure was just broken, not actively plotting my death. She nodded toward the powered-down device. The scanner's calibrated to normal threat assessment, right? But what does normal even mean? Davies leaned forward slightly. Back home, we had these things called drop bears, she said. Except they didn't exist. They were a joke. Something we told off-worlders to mess with them. But we also had actual dangerous wildlife. Spiders that could kill you. Jellyfish that could kill you. Plants that could kill you. Sunlight that could kill you if you weren't careful. She shrugged. After a while, you stop treating everything like a crisis and just deal with it. That isn't threat assessment, Vex said. That's learned helplessness. Or adaptation, Davies said. Depends on your perspective. Vest's plating shifted, reflecting a shifting pattern of light that suggested deep thought. I've studied Terran military history, she said. Your species has a documented pattern of succeeding through sheer refusal to acknowledge that you've been beaten. You call it determination. Most species call it delusion. We prefer optimism under duress, Davies said. You lost 20% of your hand's functional capacity today, the knee interjected. Temporary, yes, but still significant. And your primary concern when it happened, the knee said, was whether the instructor had intended to harm you. Well, had you? Davies asked, looking straight at Krev. The Blade Master met her gaze and held it. No, he said at last. I would not strike a student during orientation. The demonstration was meant to teach respect for the weapon, not showcase its lethality on living tissue. See, Davies said, not suicidal, just reasonably confident in basic institutional safety protocols. Your confidence, Vex said carefully, was based on assumption about instructor restraint, not on the physical reality of a blade traveling at lethal velocity toward your center mass. Correct, Davies said. That assumption could have been wrong. But it wasn't. But it could have been, Vex repeated. Davies thought about that. Outside, the academy was slipping into its evening rhythms. Different species, different circadian cycles. The entire campus, a carefully managed chaos of conflicting biological clocks. Somewhere out there, COR was probably explaining to anyone who would listen exactly how many physical laws had just been mangled. Tresh was almost certainly revising his bet on her survival timeline. Can I ask you something? Davies said. Vex made a small gesture that meant, go on. What's the mortality rate for cadets who follow all safety protocols, obey their scanners, and never take risks? 0.3%, Vex said, as previously stated. And the success rate? Davies asked. Vex hesitated. Define success. Cadets who graduate into meaningful careers in their chosen fields, Davies said. Who become what they came here to become. Approximately 40% complete the program, Vex said. Of those, roughly 60% secure placement in their desired specializations. So, total, about 24% succeed, Davies summarized. And the other, 76%, wash out, Vex said. Redirect into alternate programs, or finish training and fail to obtain suitable positions. Davies nodded slowly. And how many of that 24% do you think got there by always listening to their scanners? The silence stretched. Krev broke it. She makes an irritating point. The point, Vex said, is that there is a difference between calculated risk and blind stupidity. Agreed, Davies said. Which was this? I'm still determining that, Vex replied. Nee collected the medical files. For what it's worth, she said, the hand will heal completely. Humans have impressive tissue repair for a species without true regenerative capacity. She'll have full function back within 2 weeks. Scarring will be minimal. I told you I wanted to see how it healed naturally, Davies said. Yes, well, now we all get to see, Nee said. Consider it a teaching opportunity for the entire medical department. Vest rose, her joints articulating in ways that still looked like an anatomical puzzle. Recommendation for ongoing training? Vex asked. He glanced at Davies at the bandaged hand, at the file still stamped with that irritating word inconclusive, because no one had yet managed to pin down what exactly humans were. Continue as planned, he said finally, but flag all training scenarios involving the Terran for additional safety monitoring, and assign her shadow instructor for live weapons training. I don't need, Davies began. That was not a request, Vex said. You have demonstrated that your threat assessment calibration is fundamentally incompatible with standard safety protocols. Until we determine whether that is a feature or a flaw, you will have supervision. Krev inclined his head. I will take that assignment. You're volunteering? Vex asked. Someone must determine whether she is brilliant or insane, Krev said. I have decided it will be educational to discover which. Vex made a clicking sound. My credits are on both. That is not how binary classifications work. Denis objected. It is with Terrans, apparently, Vest replied. Vex stood, signaling that the meeting was over. Davies, you're dismissed. Report to medical tomorrow for a follow-up examination. And for the love of everything rational in this universe, try not to catch anything else with your bare hands. I'll do my best, sir, Davies said. That, Vex muttered, is what worries me. Davies left the room, cradling her injured hand. The corridor outside was nearly deserted, most cadets already at dinner or holed up in their quarters. The scanner lay quiet in her pocket, blessedly inert. Behind her, through the partially open door, she heard Vex's voice. Pull the acceptance queue for next cycle, he said. If there are any other Terran applicants, I want them flagged for enhanced screening. You think there'll be more incidents? Someone asked. I think, Vex said wearily, that we just learned something important about humans. They don't fight because they're unafraid. They fight because they genuinely don't understand when they're supposed to stop. A pause. Sir, Krev's voice. Yes. Vex replied. The human who negotiated that partnership with the Val mercenary, the freighter captain, Krev said. I pulled the report. He won the duel with a broken collarbone and a ruptured spleen. And he didn't realize the spleen was ruptured until after the fight, another voice added. Thought it was indigestion. A longer silence followed. When Krev spoke again, his voice carried a note that might have been respect or existential dread. I'm going to enjoy this semester immensely, he said, or regret it for the rest of my life. Again, Vest said, both can be true. Davy smiled despite the throbbing in her hand. Somewhere in the distance, the dinner bell chimed, or roared, or chirped, or produced whatever auditory signal counted as mealtime for species who experienced reality in frequencies humans couldn't even perceive. The scanner would probably have warned her about the nutritional hazards, the crowd density, and the existential risk of soup. She left it off anyway. And if you followed Davies this far into the halls of the Caldrith Academy, standing beside her as blades fall and scanners panic, consider this your own quiet debrief. If you enjoyed living in this universe for a while, subscribe to the channel and like, share, and comment on the video.